Hello and welcome to Lost Love Chronicles.
Dear listeners, before we get started, drop a quick hi in the comments and let us know where you're tuning in from. Also, if you have any suggestions for us to make the channel better, please let us know. Now let's start with the story. My name is Elliot, I'm 29, and for the past year, I really thought I had everything figured out. I was engaged to this amazing woman, Lydia, and honestly, I couldn't wait to start a life with her. We met a couple of years ago through some mutual friends at this game night. She was funny, sharp, just really easy to talk to. We hit it off almost instantly, and it felt natural. No weird games, no big drama. We wanted the same things in life, you know? Someday getting a house together, maybe a couple of kids, traveling, living that dream life you imagine when you're still in the honeymoon phase. It was all clicking into place. After a year of dating, I proposed. Nothing flashy, just something meaningful. We went to the park where we'd had our first date. I remember her face when I pulled out the ring. She cried and said yes right away. That was probably one of the best moments of my life. It felt perfect. For a while, everything was smooth. We jumped straight into wedding planning. Venues, color palettes, menus, all the usual. Lydia's parents, Joseph and Paige, were extremely involved from day one. Honestly, they had opinions about everything. At first, I didn't think too much of it. I figured, it's their only daughter's wedding, so of course they'd want to say. Joseph, her dad, was this retired finance guy. He had that know-it-all vibe, like he was the smartest person in every room. Half the time he'd drop random finance lingo even when it made 0 sense. ROI this, investment that, it didn't matter if we were talking about wedding flowers. Paige was just as intense, but in her own way. She cared way too much about appearances. Everything had to be perfect, and if it wasn't, she'd make these pointed, passive-aggressive comments. At first, it was minor stuff. Joseph complained the venue I liked was too far away from their circle of friends. Paige had a million criticisms about the catering. I tried to keep my cool. I mean, it's normal to have some future in-law tension, right? No big deal. Lydia seemed to agree with them more than with me, but I told myself it wasn't worth a fight. Then things started to get weird. Whenever money came up, Paige started dropping these remarks. It was subtle at first. She'd laugh and say, well, traditionally the groom's family pays for the wedding, right? And I'd kind of chuckle along, thinking it was a joke. But it wasn't just once. She kept bringing it up, again and again, whenever we talked numbers. A real man shows he can take care of his bride's family, she'd say. The first time, I let it go, but after hearing it over and over, it stopped sounding like a joke and started feeling like a test. The thing is, I was already covering most of the costs. Lydia and I had agreed from the beginning that I'd handle the venue and catering. Those were easily the biggest chunks of the wedding budget, and I was fine with that. Her parents were supposed to cover the flowers and decorations, which seemed reasonable enough. But even that turned into a massive headache. Paige kept suggesting all these upgrades, fancy floral arches and imported roses, things that were way outside of the budget we'd discussed. When I pushed back and tried to steer her back towards something more realistic, she'd sigh dramatically and say stuff like, I guess we'll make do. Like she was being forced to settle for scraps or something. It annoyed me, but I kept reminding myself it wasn't worth a fight. I loved Lydia, and dealing with her parents was just part of the package, or so I thought. Then came the night that really threw everything off the rails. A couple of weeks ago, Lydia and I were having dinner over at her parents' house. At first, it was normal enough. Joseph was going on about golf and how he'd nearly gotten a hole-in-one that week, while Paige showed us this Pinterest board crammed with over-the-top wedding ideas. I was trying to focus on my meal when, out of nowhere, Joseph put his fork down, looked me dead in the eye, and said, we've been meaning to talk to you about something important. I figured maybe he wanted to have some fatherly talk, or maybe grill me about my career. Something routine. But no, he went straight-faced serious and said, in our family, it's customary for the man marrying into the family to take on a significant responsibility as a sign of respect for us. That means paying off our mortgage. I almost choked on my drink. I literally laughed because it sounded so completely absurd I thought he had to be joking. Wait, I said, wiping my mouth, you're asking me to pay off your house. He nodded like it was the most natural thing in the world. It's not just a request, he told me calmly. It's a tradition in our extended family. It shows that you're committed to providing for your wife and her family. I sat there stunned, trying to process whether I'd heard him correctly. I looked over at Lydia, desperate for her to say something, to tell her dad how crazy this was. But she just looked uncomfortable, glancing down at her plate. Lydia, I prompted, hoping she'd step in. She just shifted in her chair and said quietly, we'll talk about it later. I tried to hold it together through the rest of dinner, but my mind was a mess. Pay off their mortgage? How was that even remotely reasonable? And why hadn't Lydia warned me? When we got back to my place later that night, I couldn't hold it in anymore. What was that about? I asked the second we walked through the door. Your dad just asked me to pay off his mortgage. Did you know about this? She hesitated, and I saw that tiny pause that always meant she was trying to pick her words carefully. I didn't know he was going to ask tonight, she finally said. But yeah, I knew he might bring it up at some point. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. And you didn't think to tell me? I snapped. Lydia crossed her arms, getting defensive. I didn't think it was a big deal, she said, sounding annoyed that I was making a fuss. I figured we'd talk about it when the time came. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Lydia, this isn't just some minor favor. They're asking me to pay off their entire house. That's insane. She let out a long, frustrated sigh. Look, I know it's a lot, but it's important to them. They've done so much for me, and this is just how they do things in our family. I stared at Lydia for a long moment after she told me, maybe we can figure something out. You've got savings, and we could take out a small loan if we need to. I couldn't believe she was even entertaining this. My brain was spinning. I finally said, Lydia, do you seriously think this is reasonable? She looked uncomfortable, picking at her sleeve. Maybe we can work something out, she repeated. I mean, you have some savings and, I don't know, it wouldn't have to be all at once. We could take a small loan if it helps. My mouth fell open. She sounded so calm, like this was just a normal thing couples talked about. I was stunned. This was beyond wedding stress. This was insane. I took a breath and tried to stay calm. Lydia, this isn't about money. This is about knowing my worth and refusing to be walked all over. She sighed, clearly annoyed that I wasn't just rolling over. Let's just think about it, okay? I don't want to upset them. Over the next few days, her parents kept needling at it. Paige would toss out comments like, it's a small price to pay for joining the family, with this sly smile that made my blood boil. Joseph acted like the whole thing was already settled, like I'd just signed a contract without realizing it. Then one night, Joseph texted me and asked me to meet him at a cafe to talk this through. Against my better judgment, I agreed. I figured maybe he'd come to his senses, but of course, he hadn't. When I got there, he was sitting at a corner table with a folder thick enough to choke a horse. Mortgage statements, payment schedules, even a spreadsheet projecting how quickly I could pay it down if I made big lump sum payments. He was beaming like he'd just closed $1 million deal. Elliot, he started, tapping the folder, this isn't just about the money. It's about respect. Once the mortgage is cleared, you'll gain a lot of standing with our family. I couldn't believe how bold he was being. He was practically trying to sell me a membership fee to his daughter. I forced a polite smile and said, Joseph, I'll need some time to think about this. But in my head, I was done. There was no way in hell I was doing this. That night, when I got home, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every second of that cafe meeting, the way Joseph had laid out those documents like we were finalizing a corporate merger. I couldn't help thinking, if this is how they're acting now, what about later? What other family traditions are they going to spring on me? And why isn't Lydia standing up for me? I didn't have the answers, but I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't normal. For days, it weighed on me like a ton of bricks. Who does this? Who demands that their son-in-law pay off their entire mortgage? The next morning, I woke up still turning it over and over in my head, like a splinter under my skin. What kind of family operates like this? I tried to talk to Lydia again. Every time I brought up her parents, she shut down, folded into herself, got defensive. I couldn't do this dance anymore. That day, I finally told her straight. Lydia, we need to have a serious conversation about this so-called tradition and about where your priorities were. When we finally sat down to talk about it, I took a deep breath and tried to keep my voice steady. Look, I began, I need to understand something, Lydia. Do you really think it's okay for your parents to expect me to pay off their mortgage? She didn't answer right away. She just stared at the floor, twisting her fingers together, like she was scared to pick a side. The silence dragged on until it felt like the walls were closing in. Finally, she looked up at me with this pained expression and said, it's not about the money. It's about respect. In their eyes, this shows you're serious about becoming part of the family. I just stared at her. I could feel my jaw clenching. I tried to keep calm. Lydia, I said slowly, I am serious about you. That's why I proposed. But paying off someone else's house, that's not love or respect. That's something else entirely. She sighed and rubbed her temples. I get it, okay? I get why you're upset. But you have to understand, they're old-fashioned. My dad believes the man marrying into the family should take on a big responsibility to prove he's ready. I shook my head. That explanation made my stomach twist. It didn't sound old-fashioned. It sounded manipulative. And the more I thought about it, the more it felt like they were using Lydia, using her love for me, to get their hooks into me. Things only got worse from there. Over the next week, Paige seemed to double down on her little digs. Every time we were around her, she'd find some way to remind me how much they'd sacrificed for Lydia growing up. One day, she launched into this long monologue about how they'd put Lydia through private school, paid for summer camps, and even helped her buy her first car. I could feel the tension building in my chest the whole time. Then she finished it off with, "We've always done everything for her, and now it's time for her future husband to step up." I wanted to scream. It was like they thought this was a rite of passage, that I wasn't worthy of Lydia unless I handed over my life savings. Meanwhile, Joseph had his own strategy. He started texting me links to articles about family traditions in different cultures, as if that somehow justified their demands, and even sent me this absurd list of wealth-building tips for young couples, like he assumed I had no clue how to handle my money. I showed the text to Lydia, frustrated out of my mind, but she just shrugged and said, "That's just how my dad is. He likes to make things a big deal." It wasn't just the mortgage anymore. It was the way they were treating me, like I was a human ATM. Every time I tried to stand my ground, they acted like I was being selfish. One evening, Paige actually looked me dead in the eye and said, "It's not like we're asking you to do something outrageous. It's a house. It's an investment for the family's future." The family's future. Whose future were we even talking about? Because it sure as hell wasn't mine. Lydia and I hadn't even started saving for our own house yet, and they expected me to sink tens of thousands of dollars into theirs. Even if I already had a house, I'd use that money for us, for a honeymoon, or maybe a down payment on a place we could actually build our life together, not on her parents' mortgage. I started wondering how long they'd been plotting this. Had they planned it before I even proposed? Did Lydia know about it the whole time and just choose not to tell me? Then came the dinner that almost broke me. Joseph and Paige invited us over, saying they wanted to clear the air. I felt a tiny sliver of hope that maybe, they'd realized how over the line they'd been, that they might actually apologize or at least ease up. But no, Joseph launched straight into another one of his grand speeches. He talked about how their family had a proud tradition of supporting one another, and how this was my opportunity to prove I was ready to be part of something bigger than myself. Then he tried to pile on the guilt. He even brought up Lydia's grandparents. Apparently when he got married, he'd helped his wife's parents buy their first home. "It's just how we've always done things," he said with that smug confidence of his. I couldn't hold back anymore. I looked him straight in the eye and said, "With all due respect, that's not how my family does things. My parents taught me to work hard and build something for myself, not take on someone else's debt." He did not like that. His face shifted into this cold, patronizing look, and he shot back, "You're still a boy. You'll understand when you're older." That was it for me. My blood was boiling. I pushed my chair back, stood up, and told Lydia, "I'll wait for you in the car." I couldn't sit there a second longer while they tried to lecture me about how I wasn't measuring up to their delusional standards. Later that night, Lydia and I had another fight. I told her, "I can't keep going like this, Lydia. Your parents are crossing every boundary imaginable." She folded her arms, instantly defensive. "Why are you making this such a big deal? It's not like they're asking you to pay it all at once. We could work something out." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I snapped, "Work something out? Lydia, this isn't a negotiation. This is my life we're talking about. My savings. My future. How can you expect me to just hand it over?" She didn't have a real answer. She just shook her head, her eyes watering, and kept saying, "I don't want to fight about this. Can't we just figure it out together?" But we weren't figuring it out together. It felt like I was fighting this entire battle on my own while she stood on the sidelines, refusing to step in. Then came the final straw. Paige called me directly. She said she wanted to have a talk woman to man, which already felt weird as hell, but I went along with it. Paige started off the conversation in this syrupy voice, telling me how much they loved me, how excited they were to have me join the family, laying it on thick. I sat there listening, waiting for the other shoe to drop. And of course it did. She shifted gears so fast it almost gave me whiplash. "You know," she said, her tone tightening, "this isn't just about the money. It's about trust. If we can't trust you to take care of something as simple as this, how can we trust you to take care of Lydia?" I just stared at the phone in disbelief. Was she serious? "Paige," I told her firmly, "this has nothing to do with trust. It's about what's fair, and what you're asking for isn't fair." She went silent for a moment, and then gave me this cold, cutting line. "I'm just worried about how this will look to the rest of the family if you refuse. People might think you're not serious about this marriage." I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. "I'm not going to change my mind," I told her flatly. There was a tense pause, then she just hung up on me. No goodbye, nothing. By that point, I was starting to wonder if I even recognized the family I was marrying into. The Lydia I'd fallen in love with, the Lydia who'd been sweet and funny and easy to talk to, she never would have co-signed this madness. Or at least that's what I'd thought. But every time I brought it up, she made me feel like I was the problem, like I should just let it go. But how could I? Her parents weren't just asking me for money. They were testing me, seeing how much they could control, how far they could push me before I snapped. And Lydia wasn't standing up for me, not even a little. That's when it really sank in. This wasn't about a mortgage. This was about power. And if I didn't draw a line right now, I might never get the chance again. I didn't know where any of this was headed, but it felt like something had to give, and soon. I appreciated everyone's comments and support. It made it easier to vent here, to get this off my chest. But you won't believe how everything started to unravel. At that point, I couldn't pretend anymore. The pressure was crushing me, and it wasn't even about the money at this stage. It was about what it revealed about Lydia, about her family, about the kind of future I might be signing up for. But even as I considered breaking it off, there was this nagging feeling I couldn't shake, like something was missing, like they weren't telling me the full story. Joseph and Paige's behavior didn't feel like ordinary pushiness. It felt calculated, like they'd drawn up a plan from the start. That night, after yet another pointless argument with Lydia, where she basically told me to stop overthinking, I decided I had to dig deeper. It started with something small. I kept remembering that weird meeting with Joseph at the cafe, the one that felt more like a business negotiation than a father-to-future son-in-law talk. That day, he'd left a folder behind. I hadn't thought much about it at the time, but now I couldn't stop wondering what might be in there. I remembered the way he'd been almost possessive of that folder, flipping through it like it was the key to their whole argument. I texted Lydia first, trying to play it cool. Hey, can you ask your dad about that folder he left behind at the cafe? She replied almost instantly, which was rare for her. Just drop it. It's not important. That set off alarms in my head. Lydia wasn't the type to dismiss things like that, not without at least an explanation. And honestly, I was tired of playing nice, tired of tiptoeing around all their games. So I decided to go straight to the source. I called Joseph directly, forcing my voice to stay casual. Hey Joseph. I was thinking about our meeting the other day. I remember you had some papers with you. You left them behind, didn't you? There was a pause, just a split second, but enough to tell me I'd hit a nerve. Oh, he said after clearing his throat, those were nothing. Just some financial notes I was working on. Don't worry about it. Yeah, right. I wasn't buying it. The next day, I went back to the cafe myself. Maybe it was paranoid, but I had to know. I asked the manager if they'd found anything left behind that day, and to my surprise, he handed the folder over without a second thought. Someone left this a while back, he said. No one's come for it, so it's yours if you need it. I took the folder and stepped outside, my heart pounding. Inside, there was a jumble of documents, mortgage statements, some receipts, scribbled notes in Joseph's handwriting. At first glance, it looked exactly like he'd said, just boring financial stuff. But then one receipt caught my eye. It wasn't for anything to do with their house. It was a payment to a place called Alden Ridge Estates. I'd never heard of it before, so I pulled out my phone and searched. Alden Ridge Estates wasn't a bank or a mortgage company. It was a luxury rehab facility, the kind of place that catered to high-profile clients who needed discreet treatment for things like gambling addiction. I felt like the ground dropped out from under me. I flipped through more of the notes, matching dates and numbers. It all lined up. Joseph had been at Alden Ridge for months, racking up insane bills. That was what they were trying to pay off, not the mortgage, but the rehab costs. Suddenly, it all made sense. The urgency, the pressure, Paige's manipulative talk about sacrifice, the fake family tradition. They weren't just being entitled, they were straight up lying to me. That night, I confronted Lydia. I was done being quiet. I held up the receipt. Do you know what Alden Ridge Estates is? I asked, my voice steady even though I was shaking inside. Her face went completely pale. Where did you get that? She whispered. It doesn't matter. I shot back. What matters is that your parents have been lying to me. They don't want me to pay off their mortgage. They want me to cover Joseph's rehab. She just stared at the paper, like if she looked hard enough it might vanish. Finally, she took a breath and said, I didn't think you'd find out like this. So she did know. I felt this surge of anger and betrayal boiling up inside me, making my voice shake. How long have you known? I asked, trying to keep my tone steady. Lydia sighed, her shoulders slumping as she sat down on the couch. My dad went to rehab last year, she finally admitted. He had a problem with gambling. It got really bad, and my mom made him go. But the bills were a lot more than they expected. I just stared at her, my mouth dry. And so they thought the best solution was to con their future son-in-law into covering it. Lydia flinched, shaking her head quickly. It's not like that, she said. They didn't mean to lie. They didn't know how to ask for help. I let out a bitter laugh. Help, I repeated, almost choking on the word. Lydia, they've been working the guilt card on me for weeks. They've called me disrespectful, questioned whether I'm serious about marrying you, and even tried to frame it as some family tradition. That's not asking for help. That's straight up manipulation. She winced, her eyes shining with tears, but she didn't argue. The more we talked, the more frustrated I became. Lydia kept trying to defend them, saying things like, they're just under a lot of stress, and they didn't mean any harm. But harm or not, the fact was they had lied to me. I pressed her again, trying to keep from shouting. Why didn't you tell me the truth sooner? Her answer made my blood run cold. I didn't think it mattered, she said softly. I figured you'd say no anyway, so why bring it up? It didn't matter? My head was spinning. This wasn't some small misunderstanding. This was a calculated effort to deceive me, to trap me into taking on tens of thousands of dollars in debt to clean up Joseph's mess. And it wasn't just that they'd lied to me, they'd tried to control me, to make me feel obligated, like I owed them something simply for being welcomed into their so-called perfect family. And Lydia, the woman I thought I could build a life with, had stood by them the whole time. The next day, after everything had sunk in, I knew I couldn't keep ignoring it. I needed perspective, so I called my dad. He listened quietly while I told him everything, every painful detail. When I finished, there was a long silence on the line, and then he sighed. Son, he said, his voice calm but firm, this isn't just a red flag. This is a giant billboard telling you to run. They're not just trying to take advantage of you. They're trying to control you. And if you give in now, it's only going to get worse. He was right. Deep down, I'd known it all along, but hearing it spelled out made it feel real. I don't know what to do next, I admitted. My dad was quiet for a second. Then he said, just be honest with yourself. If this is how they act before you're even married, imagine what the rest of your life will look like. That hit me hard, because he was absolutely right. When I hung up, I sat there, the phone still in my hand, just breathing. I knew what I had to do, but I wasn't ready to face it yet, not completely. I needed to figure out how to approach Lydia and her parents without letting my emotions explode all over the place. But one thing was clear. I couldn't just let this go. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about trust. And once trust is broken, it's almost impossible to rebuild. After sitting with everything for a day, letting it swirl in my head until I was sick with it, I knew I couldn't delay any longer. If I didn't confront them now, I knew I'd basically be telling them it was okay to treat me like this, and it wasn't. Not even close. So I called Lydia that evening. We need to have a serious talk, I told her, and not just the two of us. Your parents need to be there too. She sounded hesitant, maybe even annoyed. Fine, she sighed. But can we at least try to keep it calm? I don't want this to turn into a fight. That made me let out a short, bitter laugh. Lydia, your parents have been lying to me for weeks. I think I'm allowed to be upset. The next night, I showed up at Joseph and Paige's house. Lydia was already there, sitting stiffly like she was bracing for an explosion. Joseph opened the door with that same fake smile, the one that used to fool me. Paige, as always, went for her sugar-coated, so nice to see you, routine, all condescending sweetness. I didn't waste a second. Once we were all gathered in the living room, I came straight out with it. We need to talk about this mortgage, I said, my voice steady. Or whatever you want to call it. Joseph gave me this confused look, like he was auditioning for a bad soap opera. What's there to talk about? He asked, leaning back like he had nothing to hide. I pulled the receipt from Alden Ridge Estates out of my pocket and dropped it on their coffee table. How about the fact that this has nothing to do with a mortgage? You've been lying to me, and I want to know why. Paige's face went absolutely pale, and for the first time since I'd met him, Joseph actually looked rattled. He leaned forward, squinting at the paper, then shot a look at Lydia. You told him, he demanded. Lydia shook her head so quickly it made me sick. No, she said, he found it on his own. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So you knew? I snapped at her. You weren't going to tell me, and you were okay with that? Do you even realize how insane this is? Joseph cleared his throat, trying to get back in control of the moment. Look, he started, I don't know what you think you figured out, but this doesn't concern you. I let out a laugh, sharp and humorless. It doesn't concern me? You've been trying to guilt me into paying off tens of thousands of dollars in rehab debt, and you think it doesn't concern me? Paige jumped in, talking fast like she was trying to patch a sinking ship. It's not what you think, she pleaded. We were going to tell you eventually. We just didn't want you to get the wrong idea. The wrong idea? I repeated, nearly shouting. The only idea I have is that you're willing to manipulate and lie to me to cover up your mess, and you were going to let me start my marriage under false pretenses. Do you realize how messed up that is? Joseph's calm mask cracked, and his voice rose to a shout. You don't understand what we've been through, he barked. Do you think I wanted to go to that place? Do you think it was easy for us to deal with this? I did it for my family, and now you're trying to make me pay for it. I shot back. You didn't even give me the choice. I fired back at Joseph, barely holding in my rage. You just decided I was going to foot the bill and pretended it was some family tradition. How do you justify that? Joseph didn't answer. He just looked away, jaw tight. But Paige wasn't finished, her voice going shaky like she was about to break down. We've given Lydia everything. she said, tears brimming. Private school, a car, a college education. Do you know how much we've sacrificed for her? And now all we're asking is for a little help in return. I almost laughed. There was so much bitterness in me. Help. I snapped. You didn't ask for help. You demanded it. And you tried to guilt me into thinking it was my responsibility. That's not help. That's manipulation. Lydia finally jumped in, her voice trembling. Can we all just calm down for a second? She pleaded, looking around helplessly. This isn't helping anything. I turned to her, my frustration boiling over. Lydia, why the hell are you still defending them? They've lied to both of us. How can you be okay with this? She dropped her gaze to the floor, her voice low. I'm not okay with it, she admitted, but they're my parents. I can't just turn my back on them. That hit me harder than I wanted to admit. I understood loyalty, sure, but there had to be a line. And it was clear Lydia's line was way further out than mine could ever be. Joseph wasn't done, of course. You're acting like we're some kind of villains, he said, full of self-righteous fury. We're just trying to do what's best for our family. And if you're serious about being part of this family, you should be willing to step up. I was genuinely stunned by the audacity of this man. Yeah? Pay for you. And then what? I shot back. I get the prize of being the groom of the year. I looked right into his eyes. You don't get to decide what's best for me, I said, voice low and steady. And if this is what being part of your family looks like, I want no part of it. Paige gasped, like I'd slapped her across the face, and Joseph went red with rage. Maybe you're not as committed to Lydia as we thought, he sneered. That was it. That was the final straw. I stood up, looking straight at Lydia. I wanted to build a life with you. I told her, my voice breaking, but you already broke the respect I held for you. And I can't marry into a family that treats me like a bank account. I paused, searching her face for any sign she understood, and doesn't even respect me enough to be honest. Lydia's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't say anything. Joseph started to open his mouth, but I raised a hand to cut him off. You've said enough, I told him firmly. This conversation is over. I walked out of that house with a storm of anger, sadness, and, somehow, relief. I didn't know exactly what was going to happen next, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't let them keep controlling me. When I got home, I picked up my phone and sent Lydia a single text. I need some time to think. Please don't call me for now. She didn't reply to my text. No response. No explanation. Just silence. And as if the situation wasn't already a disaster, I got a call from one of my coworkers the next morning. Hey man, I didn't know how to say this, but your fiancé's dad, Joseph, he called me. Asking questions. Weird questions. I froze. What kind of questions? About your finances, he said. Whether you're responsible enough to handle a family. Whether you're good with money. Honestly, it sounded like he was fishing for something he could use against you. That was it. That was the moment the line wasn't just crossed, it was trampled. I was livid, humiliated, and done. I called Lydia right then and told her we needed to meet. She agreed, but by then I'd already made up my mind. This wasn't going to be another conversation. This was closure. When we sat down across from each other, I didn't waste time sugarcoating anything. We're done, I said, cutting straight through the tension. She blinked fast, her mouth already forming some kind of protest, probably another defense of her parents, but I wasn't having it. Forget them for a second, I said sharply, holding up my hand. This is about us. And right now, it feels like I'm standing alone while you're backing them up. I can't build a life like that. She looked stunned, her voice small, trembling. I never wanted it to be like this, she said. I shook my head. Well, this is where we are. I stood up. And one more thing, tell your parents to leave me alone. No more calls. No more voicemails. No more rumors. I'm done with this circus. And I'm done with you. Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment I thought she was going to break down. But she just nodded slowly. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't say another word. I glanced at her one last time and walked away. And that wasn't just the end of our relationship. That was me reclaiming my peace. Finally. But of course, the quiet didn't last. The very next day, I started getting texts from unknown numbers. The first one was short. Vague. You'll regret this. I rolled my eyes, figuring it was just some spam, or maybe one of their cousins trying to play loyalty enforcer. But then came another one. You don't just walk away from family obligations. That one. That wasn't spam. That had Joseph and Paige written all over it. The texts kept coming. They didn't even try to be subtle anymore. You're making a mistake you'll regret for the rest of your life. You clearly don't know the meaning of family if you can't handle this responsibility. I started blocking the numbers. One by one. But of course, that didn't stop them. Paige switched tactics. Voicemails. Her voice syrupy, fake concerned, but with just enough venom in the words to make my skin crawl. Elliot, I hope you're thinking this through. We're considering legal options. You've wasted our time. Our money. You led our daughter on. It was harassment. Plain and simple. Like they thought if they just hit me with enough pressure, I'd cave. That I'd roll over just to make the noise stop. I wasn't going to play that game. That same afternoon, I called my lawyer. After I explained everything, the messages, the voicemails, the coworker call, she didn't even hesitate. Start documenting everything, she said. Texts, voicemails, emails, anything they send. If this escalates, we'll need it as evidence, just in case things get worse. My lawyer also suggested sending a formal cease and desist letter, which I did. I hoped that would finally get the point across. And for a few days, it actually seemed to work. Things were quiet. No calls, no messages, no cryptic threats. I started to think maybe, just maybe, they'd finally gotten the message and decided to back off. But then Paige took things to a whole new level. She went on social media, of course, and started posting about me. At first, it was vague, that typical passive-aggressive garbage. Some people just don't know how to honor commitments, she wrote, as if she was a martyr. But soon, it turned into a straight-up smear campaign. She wrote this huge rant about how I'd led Lydia on, how I'd wasted their family's time and money, how I refused to do the right thing. The comments underneath were a mix. Some people, probably her friends, were all sympathetic, consoling her like she was some tragic victim. Others, who knew me better, were confused. A couple of mutual friends even reached out. Man, one friend texted, she's making you sound like the worst person on the planet, but anyone who knows you knows this is total BS. That helped a little. But still, the damage was done. Her post had been shared dozens of times, and it felt like the entire world was picking apart my private life like they had a right to weigh in. Meanwhile, Lydia stayed quiet. I wondered if she was finally starting to see how toxic her parents were, or if she was still on their side, just too embarrassed to say anything. By this point, I was completely drained. The harassment, the social media attacks, the manipulative guilt trips. It felt like they were trying to break me down, piece by piece, until I would come crawling back and agree to their demands, just to make the pain stop. But instead of making me reconsider, it only hardened my resolve. I realized that I didn't just step away from trouble. I escaped a sinking ship. Because if this was how they acted when I said no to one demand, how would they have treated me over the course of a lifetime? The fallout was messy, I won't lie. But eventually, it started to fade. Paige's social media posts stopped. The texts and voicemails slowed down. Little by little, I could finally breathe again. Lydia and I haven't spoken since that night I walked out, and honestly, I don't care to. She made her choices, and I made mine. I'm not going to waste another second on someone who couldn't stand by me when it counted. If she wants to sit around with her parents and justify their nonsense for the rest of her life, that's her burden, not mine. Life moves on. And so do I. Joseph and Paige taught me a brutal, painful lesson. And yeah, looking back, I wish I'd seen the red flags sooner, the control, the manipulation, the obsession with appearances, but I don't regret standing my ground. If there's one thing I learned from all this, it's that setting boundaries isn't just important, it's necessary. As much as walking away left a crater in my life, I know I made the right choice. Because in the end, no relationship is worth sacrificing your self-respect. I'll never forget the lesson I learned from Lydia and her parents, but I won't let them define me, either. Life's too short to spend it tied to people who only see you as a resource. So yeah, I walked away from a relationship I once thought would last forever. And yeah, it hurt. But in the end, I came out stronger, wiser, and more confident about what I want for my future. If you've ever been in a situation like mine, where someone tries to control you or guilt you into giving more than you can, let this be your reminder. You don't owe anyone your peace of mind. Trust me, it's worth everything to protect. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.